Welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
I'm Max Tarrant.
And I'm William Chen.
And we're sitting here on a lovely Sunday afternoon. I say lovely ironically because it is pouring with rain outside. You might even hear it as we go through. But we're sitting here in Sarah Watt's home. She's served us up some lovely baked kind of scroll with chocolate and custard.
This little red bean stuff, which is awesome.
So it's exciting. We've got cups of tea and coffee, and we're ready to have some discussions about film. So the first film that we're going to be talking about today is called Tickled. And Sarah, did you want to introduce that for us?
Sure. So, Tickled. Even if you haven't seen it yet, you'll be well aware that New Zealand journalist David Farrier, lovely bloke who we see often on the late night news with his weird and wacky segments, David got embroiled in a documentary of his own making over the last couple of years. He was investigating the scene of competitive endurance tickling, something that probably nobody had ever heard of. And as he starts to investigate what he thought was going to be a perfectly benign and possibly quite amusing and somewhat trivial situation, things started to get very dark and very deep and very quickly into the realm of what might be termed online bullying. And that's what makes this film so interesting to discuss and to watch.
Great. And the other film we're looking at is a retrospective film. It came out 6 years ago. And Max, did you want to give us a bit of a taster of the film Catfish?
Sure, as you said, did come out in 2010. This film, Catfish, inspired the popular slang for someone who creates a fake identity for themselves using social media. The film is about one man's relationship with a proficient and, in fact, prolific catfish, although it does take some time for the audience to recognise the complexity of this network of lies that we're involved in.
Great, so that's our two films, Tickled and Catfish. William, did you want to start us off?
So just before we get going, a spoiler alert for anyone out there listening, we will be talking about both films and their twists in depth. And because they're so integral to the plot of both Tickled and Catfish, I would highly recommend that if you do want to experience these films, go in fresh as possible. I think that'd be really, really good. So Tickled right now, as of recording, is in New Zealand cinemas, and Catfish is available through many, many outlets.
We did have some discussion about that, about whether we would be spoiler-free or spoiler-filled. And I think because mystery and surprise and twists are such a big part, like you said, in these films, it just made sense to have a spoiler-filled discussion.
Yeah. Otherwise we're talking around issues, and it makes it not only a little dull for us, but it makes it very dull, I think, to listen to. So, yeah, let's just go hard out.
But please check out both movies.
Yes.
They're both pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Agreed. William, do you want to get into it?
Okay, sure thing. So let's start off by talking about Tickled. And I just start by saying that I'm so excited to have this discussion with you guys. I saw Tickled last night at 8:45 showing with some friends, and it was crazy. Just such visceral reactions from the audience. Very, very much like in the moment throughout the entire film. My skin was tingling. I had real physical reactions to the movie, and it's just such a wonderful feeling. So let's, I guess, start off by talking about technique, certain filmic techniques in Tickled that made the movie interesting or made the movie what it is. So I have a couple of things here. First of all, there's a very interesting sense of place, I think, in Tickled. I was, while watching the movie, I was thinking, why are there so many shots of cityscapes and of like panning shots of someone walking in slow motion across a snowy field? And then by the end of it, it really is, it's a journey that the documentarians went on. And because of how well those establishing shots are put together, you feel like you've been on this journey with them, and it just feels much more intimate than it should be, it's really great.
I had the exact same thing, William, and it first struck me when I was watching the shots of Auckland City, and I was like, oh, this is so Auckland. They've really captured some lovely little moments of traffic moving and bicycles going past the camera. And then you get to Los Angeles, and the moment that Los Angeles is on the screen, before the title card came up, I was like, oh, this is definitely not Auckland. And then you get Michigan and all of that dilapidated buildings and
smoggy.
yeah, the ice, the Star Spangled Banner kind of wailing across the ice field, which is
and these colossal buildings striking out from a massive flat kind of landscape.
And meanwhile, the tiny little figures with their ice fishing gear, like across the foreground.
Yes.
Oh, so good.
And then you end with Times Square, which it's pretty. I was sitting there going, man, it's really hard to film Times Square in a way that surprises me because Times Square you see in so many different films and advertisements.
It's such an icon, isn't it?
Yeah, and they captured it in a certain way with this sort of, I guess, the sewer smoke coming up.
Yeah.
There was something about, I totally agree with you. That's the biggest thing that I found as well.
What you guys have described, I totally concur, but it hadn't occurred to me at all. And I've seen the film twice, and of course it makes me realise that the essence of Tickled is this is not a New Zealand film. It's made by New Zealanders who happened upon a story and then travelled the globe, America and back, but that's absolutely right. And here's where the first spoilers come in. Tickled, as it turns out, is not a film about competitive endurance tickling in a benign sense. It is a far more sinister film about somebody with a very serious agenda who gets videos created for him, as it turns out, gets videos of people tickling other people, men actually, all young men, quite strapping young men, if I may say, as well, quite well built, tickling one another, and that the videos, as it turns out, are made by people around the globe to fulfill the needs of principally this one individual, although, there are sort of a cult of people who are into watching people get tickled. And so you're absolutely right. Suddenly it's this universality, not just of the interest in tickling, but the universality of the bullying that ensues and the threats that ensue and the ruination of people's lives that ensues.
Yeah.
So, very nice point, very interesting point, yeah.
Technically, the film is just produced so fantastically, isn't it? One of my points was going to be definitely cinematography. I think you kind of covered that. There are some striking images of New York and the snow and everything like that. But for a second option, I would pick on something quite interesting which happens in both films. This is about social media and what's behind it. People behind the social media that we're communicating with, and it has in both films these shots of the screen where you're writing from on the screen, very close up. And in this film in particular, it goes so close up that you can kind of see the bleeding of the letters.
Yes.
And I feel like you're analysing what is in there, and I really love that shot, like just seeing these letters so close up on the screen, and it's kind of like a metaphor that we're trying to analyse what is actually here. What are these messages that are being given to us, and what's behind them?
True.
Which is also about our expectation versus the reality, like behind the, who's orchestrating, I guess.
Yeah.
You're mentioning, Max, the shots of the sort of the computer discovery happening is interesting because, of course, in Tickled in particular, and I did see David and Dylan, the directors, I saw them at a Q&A, and of course they freely had to admit that a lot of that filming took place retrospectively because they didn't have a camera on David's shoulder when he received the first threatening email from Jane O'Brien Media, and they didn't have it when they uncovered that extraordinary leakage of files, for example. So, of course, it's absolutely fair enough and understandable that you would recreate that and dramatise it for the purposes of your documentary.
Yeah.
And if I can draw a quick comparison to Catfish, rewatching that, it seemed to me that Catfish seemed to be filmed much more contemporaneously, and that we were literally following Neve's story. And maybe when we get to that, you might beg to differ, but it felt much more like we were. The lads who were filming Neve were there at the time shooting it, whereas with David and Dylan, a lot of things happened, and then they were like, goodness me, we need to be capturing this. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's hard not to take that and go forward to that second question, because it's a perfect segue into truth versus fiction.
Yeah, right.
The fact that these guys have gone back and afterwards they've recreated it, I think... You pointed out that it felt more contemporaneous with Catfish, and
That's a great word. I just have man.
Contemporaneous.
Contemporaneous.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you
You
mean.
gotta get your mouth around
literally
it.
happening at the same time as the thing happening.
Okay.
And perhaps we should just very quickly explain to listeners that this second question, certainly I find fascinating in documentary. That documentary, of course, is non-fiction storytelling, and therefore it purports to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But the very nature of the construction of a film, and everybody who went to film school knows all this, I know, but the very essence of constructing documentary as a visual text means you're making choices, and you're making directorial choices to not include certain scenes or certain footage, or to stop your camera's pan before it gets to a certain shot or whatever.
Yeah. You're privileging what deserves to be spoken about.
Exactly, and by doing that, you are editorializing and
Yeah.
therefore making a judgment on it, and therefore twisting ever so slightly whatever we might construe as the absolute truth, right? And so I'm sure that some people might have an issue with documentaries that use dramatization, because it's like, well, no, actually, that wasn't the person, and that isn't exactly how it was, and how do you know for sure? But for the purposes of bloody good filmmaking and getting a story across, and perhaps preserving the essence of what happened, sure, why not?
Yeah.
See, I'm not offended at all by seeing shots of David sitting in his TV3 office with a bemused look on his face, knowing that that was shot for the purposes of showing what it was like at the time. Do you know what I mean? It's legit, right?
Yeah. I really like as a bit of an aside, I really like the restraint with which they present the introduction of the film. It's so pared back, it's very simple, and I was kind of watching and like, okay, this feels pretty, it's easygoing, and then they just throw you into it. They're so confident with the material of this film and what's going to happen. It's so striking that at the beginning, it doesn't need to be super...
There's no fanfare.
No.
Yeah, nice point.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I want to just lead on what you just said there, because one of the things that I really loved, and initially I didn't like it, was the pace of the film. Tickled.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, Max, there was this ease about the start of the film. There was this lingering of shots. There was... It was going at a slower pace than I was expecting. And I initially thought, oh gosh, they're not got enough material to fill up an hour and a half. But they do. And it just sort of bubbles along, and before you realise it, like you're saying, you realise you're in really weird territory.
Deep water.
It lulls you into perhaps a false sense of...
Yes.
See, I think it's very interesting for a New Zealand audience to watch Tickled, because David Farrier is such a familiar personality to anybody really who's got a TV. And I think David has a really affable, lovely way about him in real life and on the telly. And so you're absolutely right. We get his languid voiceover, and you think, oh, it feels really familiar and a bit like one of those late night segments.
New Zealand hospitality.
That's right. This is all really, it's comfortable, it's nice, and it's going to be about, tickling, that's kind of weird, and the audience chuckles away, and all of a sudden, shit gets real. And as you said, William, it's incredibly visceral and heart-pounding, and what an
the whole way through.
extraordinary reveal, eh?
I was sorry, you go. No, you go.
Oh, okay, sure. Talking about shit getting real.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I mean, do you guys know much about the movie beforehand? I think Tickled.
Yeah.
I did know little bits and pieces. I had heard that it was pretty wacky and went in lots of different directions.
I think I knew more than I actually realised. Nothing hugely shocked me in the sense that, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected this movie to be about. I heard it was about cyberbullying, I heard it was about fetish, tickling fetish, but that didn't mean that it still wasn't uncomfortable and incredibly unsettling to sit through.
Yeah.
So I still really enjoyed it.
Even on a second viewing, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and my heart pounded only 60% of what it pounded the first time, watching the same scenes. Notwithstanding, you know that David doesn't die because we've seen him subsequently, and yet they're, towards the end, those climactic scenes, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what I knew before I saw it, but I think I knew that there was this Jane O'Brien media sort of entity that had threatened him and said, don't you come anywhere near looking at competitive endurance tickling. We don't want homosexual journalists having anything to do with it. It's none of your business, which of course is red rag to a bull, isn't it? Yeah. But I don't think I knew much past that, and I certainly didn't know where it was going to go.
Yeah, like
How about you?
well, for me, it was just it's funny just hearing you, Sarah, talk about it during our last episode or after our last episode, and then kind of I went in thinking that it was going to be about endurance tickling, whatever that was,
Great.
with a dark twist, and I thought that was going to be kind of a King of Kong-esque style thing with competitors just treating this thing very, very seriously. And so when the cyberbullying thing came in, and when it all conspires that everything is the actions of one person, that was really fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it was shocking.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
In fairness, that was a surprise to me actually. And yet you expect the way the film's designed is that it expands and expands to this global scale, and it is a global network, but it's still orchestrated by this one person. It feels both terrifying and really pathetic at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And that's a whole other issue. I mean, I don't know if we're ready to leap ahead to that. And this is spoiler alert, listeners. But I have to say, on first viewing, the minute that it transpires that this chap called David D'Amato is at the centre of all of this, and then there's that devastating phone call with his ex-stepmother, and you learn that actually here was a kid who had been bullied as a child and locked in a locker and never had romantic relationships and had had a devastatingly close relationship with a mother who had died, I think, and all that. And you suddenly get this really heartbreaking picture of a little boy with no power who subsequently became a bigger boy or a young man with a lot of money, who then obviously thought, fine, I can now, it's payback. I can now exert the power that I never had, and has done so in quite devastating ways. And I personally found my empathies quite torn by that. But at the very end, I suddenly felt discomfort at all the laughter of the audience. Yeah, you know. And I was like, well, hang on just a second. There's a wounded person here. And I know that what they've done is unforgivable, but it isn't without excuse or reason, at least. Do you know what I mean? And it's through no fault of the film that it doesn't delve into that, because it's not what the film's about. And it's not their duty, or is it? There's a question.
And I also don't think they had enough material to be able to expand on
They
that.
couldn't have. And it would have probably undermined everything else that it was about. But still, there's a part of me that goes, hang on just a second. Hey.
That nips nicely into truth versus fiction.
Right.
In the sense that if we're talking about a film being a construction, the natural thing to do here from David Farrier's part in producing it is to go, here is our antagonist. We're going to build him up as the nasty, nasty, nasty person.
Yeah.
We're going to follow that. We're constructing this. But then at the end, we get thrown this strange curveball. And I thought that was absolutely beautiful. Probably my favourite part of the movie. The fact that they just get this beautiful little conversation, just kind of on an odd whim. They go, oh, we're going to make one last ditch attempt to make a phone call, and they call up David D'Amato's sister.
Or ex-stepmother.
Ex-stepmother, oh,
something,
my bad.
yeah.
And she just gives them this beautiful little piece of information, this really realistic description of who he is and who he was, and it just completely you were ready to hate him. You hated him, and now you're just given this little glimmer of light of like what this person could be.
Totally. To pity him, eh?
Yeah.
And I do like and appreciate that it was something little. It wasn't overblown.
Yes.
David didn't like put a fine point to the whole thing. The audience was allowed to basically just reel in this new little tidbit of information and kind of change your understanding of everything based on that. It wasn't didactic. The film didn't tell you what to think.
No.
You could just decide whether you wanted to change your opinion of what just
That's
transpired.
very true, actually.
I had down as in terms of truth and reality, or truth and fiction, that the way that the documentary plays with that, I had a similar thing, and that's the moment that piece of information came into the film, I immediately started psychoanalyzing, which is what you just pretty much just did, Sarah.
Yeah.
And then I thought, hang on, I'm making a massive judgment to explain everything here, because naturally that's what you want to do in a film. You want the ending to speak to the whole film, and that's what they designed it to do. But this is still a human being. We're only given one small piece of information, and that suddenly makes a lot of what we've seen okay. So I was feeling like, oh gosh.
You mean
I don't
okay
really...
as in excused?
Well,
sort of
yeah,
excusable?
emotionally it's not as heavy, isn't it? Like,
Yeah,
the
no.
hate has sort of changed. But I'm like, we barely know anything. We only know this little piece of information that the documentary filmmakers are giving us that changes drastically our opinion of this man.
It does. It changes our opinion of him. But then maybe the wider kind of issue here is more about not about the person in specific, but about power. It's more about what happens when someone that does have some problems with his psyche
and who has been bullied and brutalised.
Yes.
Let's not forget, he was bullied in order to become a bully,
Yes,
which we
that's
know
right.
is a cliche that is true. But sorry,
but
what happens?
But then we see, okay, so that has happened, and yet the issue is not that he's become a bully. That happens all the time, that people are bullied and they become bullies. But we've seen this massive network that he's created, cells in all states around America.
The number of websites?
It just amazed me, the size of this thing.
Yeah.
And that's because he has this power to... So his own vices get amplified massively because he just has so much power behind him, because he was born into a family of so much riches.
And he can throw money at problems. Like when those...
$6 million.
And when those three representatives of Jane O'Brien Media, who have never met Jane O'Brien, because she doesn't exist, but they've never met her, they've never heard of him and all that, when they turn up in New Zealand, ready to sort of clamp on David and Dylan and say, please, anyway, don't have anything to do with this. I mean, yes, it's extraordinary resources, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, I think that there's as good a time as any to compare with Catfish.
Yeah.
I rewatched it yesterday, and I'd seen it, and I kind of vaguely remembered the girl isn't who he thought she was. But of course, I'd forgotten that when you turn up at the house and you find that this beautiful Megan model person is not in existence, and that Angela, the beautiful mom, is not beautiful Angela. She's an ordinary woman with a really, when I say a really sad life, I'm not being disparaging, but a really challenged life, who says on camera, and with beautiful sort of compassion, really, and articulation, that life didn't turn out the way that she had wanted it to. And that she dreamed of being a dancer, and she thought life would be different, and she clearly can paint, and she can clearly do some lovely things, and but she's chosen a different path, and life wasn't fulfilling. And so she, on a slightly smaller scale than David D'Amato, and with considerably fewer funds, creates 15 Facebook personas.
Still highly impressive.
It's hugely impressive. And,
especially because she's orchestrating them and having to
That's
remember...
right.
Each stage and what they're at, what have they been doing,
Exactly.
how do they relate. It's like writing Game of Thrones. So many
totally
characters, and where are they supposed to be at this time?
It totally is, but not through anything like maliciousness at all, and not because her life was horrible and she wanted to be horrible to other people, but she simply fell in love with a young New Yorker, and had this really satisfying 8 months of online relationship.
There was the connection that I had between those films, like at the heart of Catfish. And I rewatched Catfish last night and just absolutely loved it. I mean, I loved it when I first saw it. I've seen it a few times, but I was surprised how much I connected with it again. But yeah, at the heart of Catfish, you've got, without sounding too corny, it's love. You know, she loves him, and she's fallen in love with this young man, and she loves his life, his lifestyle and what he's presented to her. And at a complete flip, Tickled. It's just complete hate, because what he's addicted to, like there's the fetish stuff obviously, but ultimately it's that destroying of other people's lives.
Control.
It's the same kind of techniques, but two completely different motives, and that's what I was struck with last night, thinking, no wonder I feel so much more warmer watching Catfish and just feel so disturbed watching Tickled.
Yeah.
Because that motive is completely different.
Yeah.
As we start comparing the two, I have to self-congratulate ourselves. Self-congratulate.
I'll take it.
Because the comparison is fantastic. There's so many great contrasts between these two movies. One of the most interesting, I thought, was... I think there's actually a really interesting class dynamic to both of these films.
How they both end up in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's good as well.
The very differences of those two people.
Yeah.
Well, so Tickled is, in some ways, he's from a small country in New Zealand. He's maybe not lower class, but he's middle class. He's doing all right for himself.
You're talking about David?
David, sorry,
Farrier.
yes. And he's looking at someone who is extremely upper class, whereas in Catfish, we're focused on a man that I felt there's actually a little bit of a class dynamic between this man that comes from New York, in a little bit of a high society, artsy kind of guy, very charismatic, very confident. He could be in The Bachelor or something like that, and he's going to this woman who comes from more of a lower class background, and she wants to be part of the high society, whereas in our situation, we're looking in Tickled situation, we're looking at a person that's looking up to this horrible power that someone has at that strata of society.
Yeah. Do you know, that's so interesting, and I wonder, you see, New Zealand at the moment, right, seems very, very laden with issues of poverty and income gaps and things like that, right? And I think it's fair to say you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who was all pro being wealthy in New Zealand right now. At the moment, the wealthy people are the sort of the evildoers, aren't they? Or, you know what I'm talking about, categorised thus in the media and whatnot. And so for us watching Tickled, we do come away going, how dare you, rich millionaire with all your Ponzi money, ruining these people's lives. And perhaps America, with that sort of degree of that class gap and that money gap, though, there's still an aspiration for more and for better. And you don't look, maybe, I feel like in America, the poorer people don't look down on the richer people. It's still more of a, I wish I had what you had. I wish I had that opportunity and that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
But yeah.
There was one bizarre little parallel I just picked up just before, though, that obviously we're watching Tickled and we're thinking, this is disgusting what this guy does. But and he's a fetishist. He's got this fetish for tickling. And yet, watching it, we're being a bit fetishistic that we can't wait for this bully to be brought down. We're really
makes everything all right.
That's what we're okay with.
It makes the way that everything's
that.
being revealed. I was sitting there going, everything's been revealed about this person, and the justification is that he did it to someone else. But it's that whole justifying bullying because of bullying, and it's how the whole thing started, wasn't
and
it?
even David Farrier is very clear about it. Like he's so attracted by this bully. You know, when the bully throws him his first insult, he just jumps onto it and goes, this is in some ways, this is what I want. I can't wait to delve into this. That makes him sound more negative than he is, and when you watch it, you're totally on his side, but there is that element in some ways.
That's interesting you say that. I mean, I don't know for sure. I mean, David has said, if not in the film, then certainly in Q&As and articles and that he was getting threats from Jane O'Brien Media initially, like on a morning basis. He would wake up and there would be yet another email saying, you better back down, you better get out of it, and all horribleness. And of course, some of the snippets of those that correspondence turns up in the film, doesn't it? So I hear what you're saying, but I would agree that I think from a journalistic sort of perspective, if something awful like that is happening to you, you're not going to go, oh yeah, no, I better just keep my mouth shut. You're going to go, well, hang on a second, I'm going to find out what on earth's going on here.
And I should also make the point that it still takes incredible confidence, to track this down and follow it up. This is scary at the start when we start hearing about this. The way it's delivered to us is this guy has amazing amount of power. You do not want to get involved, and I was so scared for David Farrier.
Yeah, I was too, and you're absolutely right. I remember scribbling in my notebook, so brave, so courageous, because it was, and this is, I guess, gets back to that visceral feeling we had as viewers. I mean, if we're sitting in our cosy cinema seats with my heart literally pounding, then I was really thinking, good Lord, there he is up on the screen in this snowy street, outside a Starbucks.
Yeah.
I didn't think a gun was going to come out or anything like that. It didn't matter. It was just like, there is a confrontation about to happen, and I'm really scared.
Well, one of my friends had a scarf like over her head.
Extraordinary, isn't it? For a film that's a documentary that isn't called The Blair Witch Project. You know what I mean? It's like...
Talking about Catfish, I remember I saw it a few years ago, and I was living home in Nelson at the time, and I thought, my family have to see this. I have to show my sisters, my brother and my sisters, who are young, all on Facebook, all on Instagram, all that jazz. And I said, right, we're all going to watch this. So I made the whole family sit down, and we were watching Catfish. And I hadn't felt that same nervousness that I did in Tickled with Catfish. But my mum and my sisters, they were like, I can't watch this. And it was the scene where they drive up to the barn.
Yes. Oh, the barn scene.
And they're just like, is he, Jeremy, does he get hurt? Does he, you know, that's that kind of thing. And
that was sort of horror story tropes, actually, wasn't it? Approaching a barn in the middle of a farm at 2 a.m. You do expect someone to come out with a machete swinging or something, don't you? I suppose.
I'm
That's really
so glad you brought up the barn scene, because when I first watched Catfish, I knew it was... I think I heard it was a faux documentary, so I didn't know whether it was real or not. And so when they did pull up to the barn, I was watching it on my computer. I actually paused the computer, going, I can't take this anymore.
Oh, because I thought it might have changed into like
right there.
Like into an actual horror.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when everything was revealed and you see the big denouement of the woman and her life, that was when I thought, it's impossible that this woman's actress. This has to be, at least on some level, non-fiction. Unless they found just the most fantastic actors in the world. But to portray that humanity and that situation of living.
There's a big discussion about this one, whether it's true or not. But it's like...
Catfish? Or
Catfish. Yeah. And I think it's in my mind, it's absolutely true. And even if it wasn't, does that make it that makes it more impressive?
I know.
I mean, like if they managed to orchestrate this and write this and act it, but I don't think
I don't believe for a second that it's not true. But I also would think I'd feel very uncomfortable about it's being a fabrication, because what therefore is the moral of the story? Because Angela is such a sympathetic character at the end, and her life is so devastating, and it would seem to me incredibly cruel to just create a story about somebody with such a sad life going to those extremes, and to make that up, I would think was really mean-spirited, and therefore I would rather it fell into that stranger-than-fiction sort of camp. Did you know that Tickled, apparently, I think maybe more abroad than here, because I guess David comes with this sort of authenticity in New Zealand, because we know he's a real person and blah, blah, blah. But they have, Dylan and David have had accusations levelled that Tickled is completely made up, that it's a mockumentary, which of course it totally isn't. I believe absolutely that it isn't, because once again, why would you end with, and it turns out this guy had a horrible life and was a bully, was bullied, and that's why he's horrible. You wouldn't. I think you would construct it quite differently.
But I think Tickled is much more believable than Catfish, even. Just because of how you go on this journey. I know with, just kind of going back to Catfish a little bit. Remember during the release of Catfish, there was a lot of conversation around the fact that maybe the situation was real, but that the filmmakers were being more manipulative than they should have been.
Oh, interesting.
And so that they realized what the situation was early on and decided
to keep going.
This is going to be an amazing documentary.
But fair enough, no?
Because
she's still doing it.
Even when they're visiting her, she's still on the beach, like, fabricating lies.
But that's present in the film, because he has those conversations with her. He's like, oh yeah, so you're making that music, are you? Yeah, I am. And they already know, in terms of the narrative of the film, that that's not her music. In terms of truth in the documentary, which is not, maybe it's a little bit of a twist, but with Catfish, what impresses me most about that film is how it just... 40 minutes, the last 40 minutes of the film is her. You know, it's not like it's the big reveal.
No.
And that's what made it feel very true to me.
And sympathetic, I think.
It's sympathetic. And it lingers on her life, and it lingers... Initially, it's so uncomfortable how it's just like, come inside. And you don't really know what's going on for about 5 minutes. But the fact that they stick with her for, you know, that 40 minutes of the film, you get such a strong sense of who she is.
Yes, her life and...
And it's very raw, isn't it? Because when she's painting, she's doing another sketch of Neve at the end.
Oh wow!
And they've had the conversation where she knows, he knows. So she's been outed. At which point, other sort of subjects, protagonists, could easily just shut down and say, I'm not talking to you any further, push the camera out the door, and that's the end of that. And I think because it was so sensitively handled, she stays with it.
I wonder what the conversation was before that scene as well. Like, why did she allow them to keep the camera running, and why did she have that conversation?
She says she feels she won the film. I feel I owe it to you. And I remember when I first watched it, and the moment she comes into the film, I thought, and you realise she's not who she says she is, I thought, oh, this has still got half an hour to go, and she's on camera, not blurred out. So she's agreed to do
Yes,
that.
yes.
And that's when I was just like really intrigued, because I was like, there must be something going on here that she's quite happy to step up and be like, this is who I am. And
do you know what I
that's the
think
reason.
it is? As the lady around the table, it comes back to the fact that she was in love with him.
Yeah.
And he treated her courteously and sensitively, and he did not rail at her and say,
No.
you lied to me.
He did a really nice
and
job in
you
that
pretended
sense.
you were this beautiful supermodel, how dare you. They were super nice to her, And I think, therefore, she clutched on to wanting to spend more time with him.
And keep that friendship. She even says
And
that.
keep that
Yeah.
friendship.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that a more cynical version of myself might have thought, oh, she probably wanted the attention and she kept the cameras rolling because she still wanted the attention. But I actually think she just wanted to continue being with him. And the fact that as the title cards go up at the end, it says Neve has 756 friends on Facebook and Angela is one of them, and she's deleted the rest of her profiles, but they're still friends. I think, good Lord, what extraordinary kindness and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they say in the car, there's the guys say in the car, you know, I don't want. They kind of have this moment where they think, holy crap, we could destroy this family. Like we could really screw things up. And they were like, we don't want to do that. We need to be really careful how we handle it. It's funny as well. Just on a side note, the older brother, who's like, we're going to do this, and Nev's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in this documentary. This is my life.
Yeah.
And then later on, he's freaking out, and Nev's like, come on, let's do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's a nice little switch of dynamic,
Yeah.
how the brothers realise, oh, holy crap, this is already happening. And Nev's
Yeah,
like, screw this,
totally.
you got me into this, we're going the full way.
Yeah.
Thinking about issues of truth, actually, I realised that when we put that as a question for ourselves, that we meant truth within the context of documentary filmmaking, fiction versus non-fiction. But of course, the very essence of both films is the issue of truth. And I think that when I watch Catfish, I feel very, very uncomfortable because, without wanting to be too revealing, it does sort of poke at times when I have sort of fallen for someone's bullshit or something, you know, in a potentially
Online or-
romantic context, or even in real life. But you know, people sort of spinning you tales and that sort of thing. When you find out later that that wasn't true, the indignation is enormous, particularly mainly for me. Perhaps it's just a hell hath no fury like a woman scorned thing. Who knows? But point being, I would have wanted to fight, like, you know, when there was that opportunity in Catfish where they realised she's been sending them songs that weren't her own. And there was the option there for them to cut it off straight away. And they say, well, no, partly for filmmaking, let's keep going, but also let's figure out what this is about. Well, personally, I would not want to be backing away, tail between legs and going, oh, this guy, if it was a guy, you know, this guy turned out to be a liar. I'll just sort of forget about it. I'd be like, hell no, I want to know what's the truth behind this situation, because the truth is really important. And therefore I can understand David Farrier, and aside from his being a journalist, I think that when you suddenly realise there's something really fishy going on here, and I'm being threatened not to investigate it further, it's wanting to find out what is
what
really
motivates
going on
this
here. Because, you know, who wants to feel duped, and who wants to, you know, quite aside from issues of whether Angela might have gone on and catfished other people, you know, I don't even think that was their concern. And
You know they've got a TV series, eh?
and you know that Neve is the presenter of that. I hadn't
and the brother.
realised.
And Ariel.
Ariel, right.
And now Catfish is just verbing all over the place.
Absolutely.
Well, that's something to talk about. That's what I had down for bigger connections.
Yeah.
You know,
Right, yeah.
how does this film, how does Catfish connect to the wider context? And
Hugely.
it's become a verb.
Yeah.
My friends
Yeah.
don't know Catfish started off as a movie.
No.
And part of
Yeah.
me, whenever I hear it, I have to double check myself and think, hang on, is it the film? And then I think, well, yeah, of course it is, because there's that metaphor that Vince says at the end,
Amazing.
which captures where the catfish phrase
And
comes from.
It's so clean. Slightly going back to the narrative stuff, I think what's amazing about both films is that they both end on such a note of finality. It's a little more open-ended in Tickle's case, but at least for Catfish, oh my gosh, just how did they get Vince to have that footage there? And it perfectly summarizes the entire movie up to that point.
And little did they know that they were neologizing at that
know.
moment. Hey, wow, Catfish, that's going to become a thing. They would never have known.
Incredible.
But
Interesting that it comes from the husband.
Yeah.
You know, it's a
Who's
weird thing that we
oblivious.
don't, and we don't really have a whole lot of, like, I didn't feel like that tore me. The fact that this woman's actually in love with a man from New York, and we're talking to her husband.
Yeah, but he didn't know when they were filming that.
No,
I
he
don't
didn't,
know
but
how
isn't
much-
that a weird thing? Shouldn't we kind of be a little bit angry with the woman that she's actually in love with two men? But you don't even focus on that.
No, you don't.
But I don't know how much he doesn't know. Like, there's all that stuff where she's like, yeah, he never picks up the phone,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But then also he was fully aware that she, you know, she had other dreams and they had discussions about it. And he says, look, if you want to go do something else, go do something else. And he says, but she always comes back to the fact that she does love us and she does want the security and she wants a house.
To be fair, the way Vince puts it before he says, if you want to do something else, go for it. He actually sort of says to her, well, you realise you can't have everything you want in life.
Yeah.
And what is, you know, we can't all have our dreams.
Yeah.
What is it that you want?
I think you
She
go
goes,
with
I
what's
want
more solid."
security. That's right.
Yeah.
And he's like, see, there you
And
go.
that's
then.
me, baby.
You want me, my disabled
don't want that
sons,
guy.
and this kind of, you know, sort of like working class kind of life with no dreams.
But I mean,
yeah.
it's true. But then her artwork, it's fine, but it's not amazing. Like,
No.
she's not going to become a. Maybe I'm being cynical, but
No,
I don't
I
think
think-
she's
I
not. She's
think
not
it's-
going to be.
it's
And I mean,
implicit.
that's why she put the artwork under Abby's name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what kickstarts the whole movie.
Which is
That's
pretty
right.
sad.
Girl.
Yeah.
And then they ask Abby at the end about her drawing, and
Oh.
she's just completely oblivious.
Yeah.
And it's-
You're
yeah.
confusing me.
Can you imagine when she came up with the idea to put it under the 8-year-old's name? It's like someone comes along and goes, God, an 8-year-old could draw better than that. And she goes, ting.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Ah, now you're thinking.
See, the film was also really lovely in that, yes, as you said earlier, Jeremy, they didn't want to destroy that family, and so the boys don't swan in there and say to Abby, so you're a painter, are you? Show us all your stuff. Oh, your mum said you're a painter, or any of that. They don't reveal
Yeah.
to Vince or to Abby or anybody else any of what's private between Angela and Neve. And, you know, we can only assume Vince has seen the movie subsequently and gone, wait, what?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
See, this is a nice segue back into Tickled, because I was sort of battling with questions around what justifies this film, what justifies investigating into this world, and I mean, I think an easy answer would be, well, the people that have been hurt, they deserve to have their retribution, but I think it's back to that discussion we were having earlier about what is okay when we're talking about bullying. Is it okay to oust the bully in that way?
Well, I think it's important that, I mean, gosh, Tickled would have been a morally reprehensible film if they'd found out about David D'Amato's past and not included that. Because then we
Yes.
as an audience would purely
Oh,
be
yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
evil man sitting in a tower in New York with heaps of money, ruining people's lives. I think it's an incredibly important
It
coda.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, it brings to, so I'm just thinking in terms of him, David Ferrier being a New Zealander, that fact that he's jumping on the fact that he's a bully, a little bit of a random connection, but do you remember was it New Zealand's Got Talent? No, X Factor, and there was Willie Moon and
Yes.
Natalie
Oh,
Kills,
yes,
That's right.
and how they made those comments to that singer.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, I wasn't watching it, but it exploded online, and people were going, "Oh, that's absolutely terrible." And then it developed one step further, where they were saying things like, Natalia Kills, she should go kill herself.
Yeah.
Willie Moon, and I was like, "Hang on,
Hold on, just
hang
a
on,
second. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
you are saying worse things."
Yeah.
Yeah.
To these people for saying something that's their job. Their job is to be these controversial
They've
judges.
been
Or at
encouraged.
the very least, you're being hypocritical because
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
saying, "How
Yeah.
dare you bully? We're going to bully you
Yeah.
for your bullying." Sure.
So I guess that's what I'm battling with Tickled, and I don't have any conclusions or any strong thoughts on it. I just was thinking, all right,
Are we bullying him?
awkward. Yeah, are we bullying him? And he definitely deserves to answer for the lives he's the lives he
Yeah.
ruined.
And the
But
fact that,
okay.
the fact that the justice system's doing no service, because in the film we find that he's kind of been put through the justice system before for some of his major transgressions.
And he was
but
still doing it while in jail,
Yes,
which
yes,
is
Yeah.
yes.
absurd.
Well,
And
must
then
have
getting
been-
a law degree.
And
Yeah.
but he gets kind of acquitted on most charges or something, or he doesn't have to do much time because his father's this massive lawyer, or
Wall
formally,
Street.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously gave him meaning or a sense of satisfaction. What about when they tell the stepmother and she goes, "Oh no."
Yeah.
Yes,
Is he doing that again?
He's never stopped. Oh,
Oh,
no.
yeah.
that's. I feel like that's that. When we say truth can be stranger than fiction, it's also kind of like more subtle and nice than fiction, isn't it? And like that that is so subtle and beautiful. This like, he just picks up the phone and says, "Oh, you're David D'Amato. Do you know him?" And oh yeah. He's at it again. Oh, okay.
It's so human.
It's so soft.
Yeah,
and
it's lovely. Yeah.
Whereas, I feel like in a fiction movie, you'd never think to do it that kind of subtly.
Yeah, be face to face.
Yeah,
I think
action shots.
The humanity in both films, and how both Angela and David D'Amato are so they're humans. They're humans, and that's what brings that complexity. And
it's a real tribute to documentaries, and I guess part of the reason we're here and enjoying this
and that we feel something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Jeremy, honestly, what you've just said though is really sort of resonating with me, because I saw Tickled in the Civic Theatre, and it was packed out, and there was a Q&A afterwards, and as we've all experienced, I guess, did we all have quite full audiences when we saw it? Right.
I saw it at the Academy. You saw the
Me
Academy,
too, yeah.
It was in the middle of the afternoon.
Okay.
It was a peppering of people.
But I feel a little bit guilty about the fact that, as you're alluding to, Jeremy, that all the audiences are coming away going, "What a bad guy! He's awful," despite the fact that we know that horrible things had happened to him in his past, because what he did do is awful. And you're right. I sort of think to myself, it isn't defamation or libel, really, because it's based on truth for starters. But at the same time, this film is going around the world. Mm-hmm. And the name David D'Amato will possibly one day be the sort of name that people will instantly know and go, "Oh yeah, that guy."
Yeah.
The
6
guy
years' time, the catfish.
the tickling king who ruined people's lives. And that's really heavy. And in a way, you're right. It's almost as if he's going to be bullied all over again by audiences of unknown people watching him and judging him. Because effectively, that's what we're doing. And I do have a degree of discomfort about that.
I was thinking about that today. I actually Googled David D'Amato. Everything that comes up is related to Tickled, which, and then afterwards it's like he works in the law firm.
The same things happen to him.
And of course he's going to retaliate. Of course he's going to send lawyers and PIs and say and take down notices and all that kind of thing. And it is a little bit like, well, dude, you brought this upon yourself. But I feel an awkwardness about that, And if anything tragic happened and he were to take his own life, for example, as a result of this, that would again twist things, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we would all have, yet another sort of 180-degree turn of how we feel about the situation and all that. Which is why it was a blessing that Catfish was handled so sensitively, because that poor woman could have, at the end of that film, just felt so humiliated. That it was all over Red Rover in some way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yes, it's awkward, isn't it?
It is awkward. I think the class thing is an interesting one to bring back into it, because, yes, all that's true, but, like you're saying, the justice system had failed. There's that comment that those guys that come to New Zealand and say, rich people, they live by different rules than us. And it's like, well, hang on, who else is going to actually stop this person from treating people? So I guess I'm now reneging on what I said.
But this is what makes it interesting and tricky, isn't it? Exactly.
Going backwards and forth.
It's not black and white at all.
Yeah.
And speaking about the kind of landscape that it's come from, or the context that it's come from, it's so it needed to come from New Zealand in some ways. And like our culture is so egalitarian, or tall poppy syndrome, you might call it, that we love this,
which is what I think.
And when he comes to New Zealand, he goes, that we got big money. Everybody's just like, oh,
get
out of it. You're going down, mate.
But the trio of people they send is just they're like sent from a casting agency.
It's like the if not the Marx Brothers, who am I thinking of?
The Three
maybe.
Stooges.
It is a bit like that, isn't it?
And there's that one guy, Adam, who's just stunned, like
the dumpy young guy.
When they go to Los Angeles, he sees them and goes, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, that's right.
And it's good cop, bad cop, because the guy's like, "Oh, can I have that sign? Oh,
Keep it.
Wow. And then the other guy,
It's interesting. This is somewhat goes back to a technique, I suppose. I noticed watching Tickled how much they had to rely upon I was going to say sneaky camera work. And I don't mean when David makes that wonderful camera in a coffee cup, which is just beautifully done.
Did you see that they had private investigators sent out of one of the screenings because they were trying to film the film
with the camera
in a coffee cup. Like, that's so funny. But I mean, so not just that, but even when they walk to the Hilton, and there's that very, very long shot of Dylan and David walking along, and the voiceover, of course, is what's being recorded up in the conference room. And they're like, look, we wanted to have this meeting off camera, blah, blah, blah. And part of me felt like, oh, steady on, that's a bit unfair, because they thought they were talking off the record, but you were recording it. And part of me then is also going, but dang, we need to know what's being said.
Because I remember
So
they
the
shoot
ethics
outside the window of the
that's
office, you
right.
see the back of their head.
That's right.
Beautiful
so the
shot
ethics
of
of it all.
hallway, though. Sorry, just there's that shot of Hilton hallway or the open. It was lovely. But yeah, carry on. I hear you.
So therefore, I sort of think, I wonder what the ethics of documentary filmmaking are, or indeed investigative journalism. And I think that we all know that the ethics include putting a little camera on your button, on your, you know, or whatever, and doing what you can to get the story. And of course, we wouldn't have had it any other way. So
Same with Catfish, how he ends up putting on the wire,
Yeah.
and then they do a hug test to make sure
that's right.
that's feel the wire.
There's that moment as well where he's yelling at his buddies, "You gotta plug the thing in!"
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's the tricky thing, isn't it? Because in the scene in Catfish, towards the end, Angela and Neve are over by the fence, aren't they? And they're watching the young lass on the horses. And she thinks they're having a private conversation, just the two of them. And of course, she doesn't know that it's being recorded, which enables her to be much more open, to the extent that she's open, but to the extent that she continues to lie and things like that anyway. But yeah, I wonder about that sort of thing, you know. I don't get. I mean, I literally wonder. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
have a position on whether there should be rules that say you have to tell people if you are recording them or if you are secretly filming. Because I mean, obviously, that would just like be the ruination of everything. wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder.
Some really interesting ethical questions coming up today, eh?
It's quite deep, isn't it?
I think the timing of Tickled was fantastic in terms of having Panama Papers and stuff recently.
Yeah.
And we're wondering, what is these people that have these sheltered lives that can stand behind, I don't know, a wall of money, I guess, or hide behind a wall of money. What is their lives like? What do they do with it? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, here's something.
This must be all of them. No, but if they're completely stuck, if they're
And this is just
psychologically
one dude,
messed
right?
up, then that is, I mean, that's amazing. What I wondered at the end was, like, if he's a fetishist and he's getting his rocks off for this kind of thing, why does he need so much of it?
Because
It's more a power thing, isn't it? It's just like, I want
Because-
as much as possible because I can, because I like this guy. He picks out these particular characters that he wants and he pays all the money, you know, goes, I want that guy, he's got the certain characteristics that I want.
That's the biggest thing. I went with a friend of mine, and we were talking about it afterwards, that there's the fetish side of things. Obviously, he's into this tickling fetish. But then there was the guy in Michigan, and he was saying that for no reason, once they were dependent on him, that's when he flipped.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a retribution for them going public or coming against him or wanting to step away. He just did it for the hell of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that
When they couldn't afford,
Yeah.
when they literally couldn't afford to not do it anymore,
Yeah.
he'd pull the rug out.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
wanted to
right.
push them to the limit in some ways, didn't he?
Right.
Oh, it's so twisted.
It is twisted, isn't it? It's very interesting.
And Max, what you were saying about like the Panama Papers and this current culture, it's so funny that a movie like Tickled is also released just a couple months after stuff like The Jinx, Serial, what else? Making of a Murderer, just all the stuff that's investigative journalism, a surge of investigative journalism. That's all about like the little guy.
Totally. It is definitely a cultural and
desperation
timing thing, isn't it?
determination. Yeah.
That we're in this moment. I felt that a lot, that these days are getting a lot more interested in what is actually going on at the top, and I think that speaks a little bit to our question of truth and fiction, like what is the truth behind this, you know?
And by comparison, in 2010, it wasn't all about this. It was about the advent of quite serious social network activity and people falling in love with people who didn't actually look like who they purported to be and all that kind of thing.
A bit softer, wasn't it? A bit more kind of...
Kind of, except that I do think affairs of the heart are as devastating.
Certainly.
And we're not even into Nigerian prince territory or, that kind of business. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and because Catfish and Social Network came out in the same year.
Oh, right.
I think
Really?
it would be an awesome double feature.
Yeah.
Just the terrors that Mark Zuckerberg has
Yeah.
brought upon the world.
You think Facebook in terms of the way we use Facebook, it's actually changed so much in 6 years. And I mean,
Yeah.
in terms
It
of
looks totally
relationships,
different as well. The interface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you notice that the interface in Catfish
That's one of the
looked
things-
really old school?
Yeah.
It was
sorry.
my film technique was the way they incorporated Facebook as the technology,
Yes.
you know, and they introduced characters by rolling the mouse over
the names.
over their names, and their names popped up.
And it doesn't do that anymore.
Well, it does, but it's
Well, not just Facebook, Google
It's
Maps as well. Every
Oh,
time they
yeah.
travel.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, well,
That was
the
quite a big
GPS
thing at the
display.
time,
it
wasn't it?
places
It was huge, yeah.
places it in its
Yeah.
time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But what I actually meant was the way that people build relationships online is completely changed. You know, you've now got Tinder and various things. It's all through phones, and Facebook is no longer what it was. Well, it's changed, hasn't it? So yeah, Catfish is very much of its time, and it'll be interesting to see what we make of Tickled. I mean, I think Tickled's a little bit more.
It's not so much about the technology,
No.
it's about the people
No.
behind
Yeah.
the technology, isn't it?
And it's been going on for 20 years, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Since the advent of the internet.
Both of them are definitely interested in what the powers of these social media are, but it's not really a question of these technologies being something that gives you power necessarily. It's how you use them, isn't it? They're a tool, and you can use them in a negative way or a positive way, but you can definitely use them to disguise yourself and hide behind.
Yeah, well, hide behind. Yeah.
I love that we connected these two films. I don't know how fully we were aware of it, and you had seen Tickled, hadn't you, when we
Yes.
decided these.
Yeah.
But the fact that they are films that have two antagonists that are hiding behind a persona,
Yeah.
and I was sitting there watching Tickled and then rewatching Catfish, just connections all the time,
And I think also, I mean, this was something we were going to touch on if we had the time, but I think also it was the reason I thought they possibly connected was that the films start and you think they're going to be about something and they wind up evolving into something else, which I also think is one of the most fascinating aspects of documentary, is that by and large they're not scripted before the fact, before you shoot. You obviously have an idea of what it is that you want. And sometimes that's exactly what you'll get because it is a biography or whatever it might be. But in both of these films, the interesting thing is the journey that you go on. And it's like, well, we just don't know when we approach this bar at 2:30 if someone with a machete is going to come out or not. Or we just don't know what we're going to find when we go to Los Angeles and blah, 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 and find a tickling ring.
The mere fact that they find something and it's so definitive with all the files just left online. Yeah, so for me, I think both films were just, there was so much tension and almost unbearable tension at times for both films. But then to end with so much humanity, I think, is quite extraordinary. I love both of these movies. And even watching Catfish for the second time, I mean, it still hit, and it hit hard. And then Tickled, just, it's a fantastic time at the movies.
Yeah, I agree. I love both of these films, and I think my biggest takeaway is that comparison that I made earlier of one being very much a film about love, and one being very much about hate, to kind of boil it down to a very corny comparison. Yeah. And if I was to ever watch it as a double feature, I would definitely watch Tickled first, so that I could end on the more warmer Catfish.
Yeah, sure. Similarly enamoured of both films. Tickled, I think. I would just say that documentaries routinely wind up in my top 10 films of the year every year when I'm compiling them, and Tickled will be no exception. And I frequently feel that documentaries in particular are the sorts of films that at the end I'm recommending and I'm saying you need to see this. Everybody needs to see this. This is not just about competitive endurance tickling. You need to see this, and I think I applaud Dylan Reeve and David Farrier for ending on a moderately compassionate note, or at least giving that tiny glimmer of perspective, because I think it's really important that when New Zealanders and everybody around the world watch Tickled, that yes, they get this sense of this dreadfulness that has happened, but that they also get that pause for thought but look at the character behind all of this and look at the way this character was created. And so it's sort of that lesson in humanity that I consider to be particularly important. And that is, I think, what makes it quite a great documentary, is part of what makes it great and a must-watch. So go see it. Yeah,
Definitely, both films fantastic. Catfish blew me away. It'll be in my top films of the year so far. Just, I think we can go back to the fact that your skin will be crawling watching this film. It is intense.
Tickled or catfish?
Tickled.
Oh, I
personally.
see. Oh, you said
sorry,
catfish.
did I say catfish?
Yeah, sorry.
And my takeaway is a little bit more ambivalent. Is a bit more. I think that discussion we've been kind of the theme of the morals of this has been the most interesting part for me, and I think there's some really interesting questions there. Obviously, we love to watch these movies, and your glimmer of hope is beautiful, but there's something to always keep on discussing about this, about this dilemma we face when we follow these things. What truth are we creating?
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening to our discussion of Tickled and Catfish. As we said, please go out and watch them if you, well, hopefully you've seen them already, so maybe go rewatch them, and keep an eye out in a month's time for our next